Hey guys, welcome to today's video. Today's review is going to be a little bit different. The weather's kind of turned where I live. We got some snow, so it makes riding bikes a little bit harder. Also, I don't want to risk crashing and damaging bikes that I'm borrowing or leasing, from bike shops or from friends. So for right now, I don't have a new bike review for you today, but today I wanted to cover and review a topic that I think is a really big topic right now in the bike industry, and it is bike sizing. So specifically, should you go one size up, one size down, if you're in between sizes. So I'm going to try and be as objective as possible, trying to go through the comparisons. The demonstration bike we're using today is a Hightower LT from Santa Cruz. I have access to a large and an extra large, and so we're going to use that model as how I set both bikes up and also how they felt riding. So first off, the Hightower, the differences between the large and extra large. So between the demo bike that I rode that had a Fox 36 150 millimeter, and the extra large that I rode had a Lyric 160. Now I know that's not a quite apples to apples comparison, but I set them up accordingly, and I know a lot of people like to do the 160 fork on the LT. So the stack difference between the two bikes was 24 millimeters. 10 of that was the stack difference between the two frames, and 14 of that was between the axle to crown on the Fox 36 150 and the Lyric 160. So the large that I rode, I put 25 mil spacers in there, two 10s and a 5, to kind of create that stack height difference. Now, what does that do though is now that you've kind of taken the stem and you've raised it, and obviously that steer goes at an angle, you've shortened your reach. So I mentioned in the large, in my ride video, that I felt maybe I was over the back more. And whether that was actually true or not, we'll go into that later. I think because my reach was a little bit shorter, my weight was a little bit further back, a little bit more upright. Also 780 mil bars versus 800 that are on the extra large that I rode. So, your width is a little bit shorter, so it kind of gives you a little bit more space in the cockpit. So those are the differences in the bar, stem, reach, and all that. Now going to the seating area, there is a 40 millimeter difference in seat post length between the large and the extra large. That comes out to be just over about 1.5 inches from millimeters to standard. So the large that I rode was about 1.5 inches-ish of dropper seat post showing, and I want to believe it came with 175 mil cranks. I forgot to check, and I was looking over the internet, but I'm almost certain that there were 175. So the large, I was able to slam the post. Now the large that I rode had 170 millimeter dropper, whereas the large had 150. And I did have slightly shorter cranks. The extra large that I rode had 170. I was able to check that. I tried to set them up as close to 30% sag as possible. And the straddled position, with the dropper seat lowered all the way, felt about the same. I could pretty much, when I'm sagged in, could stand flat-footed with a little bit of bend in the knees on both bikes, with the seat post height differences, crank length differences, and things like that. Now, with the extra large, being that the Dropper was more forward. Bars were completely slammed. I definitely felt more in the middle of the bike. And again, whether that's actually true or not, that's what it felt like to me. And that's what it felt like climbing, and that's what it felt like descending. So keep in mind of those hidden things like shorter reach if you have to use, a lot of spacers under the stem. The further back you raise the seat post out of the seat tube is going to push that saddle back, more forward. And one other difference I forgot to mention, the reverb dropper, the bottom, plate that, holds the bottom rails, and then you have the top plate that holds onto the top of the rails. If you actually look, the rail lengths on each side of the plate, one side of the plate has longer rails and the other has shorter. So I actually flip it around to where the longer rails face forward, so I'm able to scoot my saddle forward a little bit more. I am not saying or endorsing that you should do that. That's a risk that I take, and I've never had any issues. On the large, I definitely left it in the regular position where the longer part of the rails face outward, so you can't scoot the saddle all the way forward as much. Just because I did need that extra length. So that was one more difference that I almost forgot. As far as how the bikes felt, the large was definitely a bike I could take and ride all day. 15 plus miles, with thousands of feet of vertical, you could do it easy on the large LT. It's a more upright position. You're not as stretched out. I've mentioned in my videos, about just over 6 foot with shoes on. The large, I could comfortably jump on, ride a lot of miles, climb a lot of vertical with it. Descending, it was very confidence inspiring. Again, it comes down to those 29er wheels, but the size of the bike didn't feel bad too. Now my preference though is to have a little bit of a larger feeling bike. Because I don't have a lot of style. I don't, jumping is one of those things that I'm still working on. I just don't prefer a very playful bike, nor do I need one at this moment. For me, fast is fun, and the extra large LT gives me that. So it gives me just that little bit more length and stability. Again, I feel like I'm more centered in the bike. So I don't feel off the back. I don't feel too far forward off the front. It feels really good. The extra large, able to just charge down lines confidently, with the slightly wider bars. I don't have any of those tendencies to, jerk, one side to another. So it just created a more stable feeling, and that's what I prefer. So I would say there isn't a right or wrong in sizing. If you're 5'11", 6 foot in my range, I'm not going to tell you large is wrong, extra large is right, or extra large is right, wrong. I'm a proponent of you jumping on a bike, feeling it out, evaluating the type of riding that you want to do and the trails that you're on, and getting yourself fit for that purpose. Try not to let, editorial companies or bike magazines or things like that tell you, oh, you always have to go larger. Because then, even at 5'11", 6 foot, someone can have shorter arms, shorter legs, longer torso, shorter torso. Overall height doesn't tell the full story. So really try and see if you can at least sit on a bike and see if you can play around with the cockpit a little bit and adjust it. So if you have any further questions on the setup of the bikes, found any errors in my thought process or whatever, definitely feel free to call me out on it or ask follow-up questions. I'd love to have those discussions with you. Again, I'm not a bike fit expert. This is completely how I feel with these two bikes on the trail. So if you enjoyed the video, please give me a like and subscribe if you haven't, and we'll see you next time, hopefully with an awesome bike review.